All right, guys, we did it. Episode 5. Today, I'm going to teach you guys how to maintain your guns. So I want to start this first off by saying thanks for watching, thanks for making it to this point, and also adding another little disclaimer. I am not an airsoft tech. I don't really know the internals super well. I've never built my own gearbox or anything. So this is the section which I am least educated about, and I might make some mistakes. So again, please feel free to correct me in the comments. Just don't get mad at me, please. So first off, maintaining your guns. When it comes to airsoft guns, they're very easy to maintain. It doesn't take a whole lot of work. When it comes to your gas guns, like your rifles and your handguns, learn to take them apart. All you gotta do is wipe them down with a dry rag, and you need to buy some silicone oil. Use a little bit of silicone oil around the moving parts, especially parts where metal and plastic are grinding together, and put them back together. Personally, with my handguns, I wipe them off, clean them out, and re-grease them, usually the day before I go to play, every time. When it comes to your AEGs, it takes a lot less work. If your AEG starts to seem like it's shooting inconsistently, maybe you need to clean the barrel. Usually when you buy a gun, it comes with a unjamming and cleaning rod. Do not throw this away. At the end of the unjamming rod, it's a little eyelet. All you gotta do is take a small piece of cotton or microfiber cloth, cut it up so it's nice and small, put it in that eyelet, soak it in rubbing alcohol, and just slide it down the barrel. When you pull it out, you should be able to see if there's any stuff coming up. I suggest using rubbing alcohol and not water, because rubbing alcohol dries fast and won't get in all the components and everything. Just use a little bit of rubbing alcohol, swab it out, it'll be dry in a few minutes. Other things to consider, just remember, AEGs, they're electronics. Keep them out the rain, keep them out of water. In the rain, your gun will continue to work and function, but if it's in a wet environment for an extended period of time, consider taking the gun apart to at least wipe it down and check for dirt and whatnot. So other than that, just treat it like any other object that's a machine that you treat it. Keep it out of the rain, keep it out of the dirt, keep it running nice and smooth. Now, I'm going to try and explain to you guys how an AEG works. The best way to do this, I figured out, is just to explain what happens after you pull the trigger. So, let's say you have your rifle and you plug in your 7.4 volt LiPo, because that's what you were going to get. So you plug in your 7.4 volt LiPo, and now you pull the trigger. What happens? Well, the first thing that happens is there's two metal plates that connect, the trigger contacts. This completes the circuit between the battery and the gearbox. The first thing to turn is the motor. The motor's job is just to spin. That's what it does. So if you replace the motor, you can buy high torque motors that will spin faster upon startup. So that will increase your semi-automatic fire rate. But high torque motors will not fire as fast on full automatic. High torque motors are better for battery power. They're very fuel efficient, I would say. And that's usually what I'd suggest if you want to upgrade your motor. Go with a high torque. There also exist high speed motors. High speed motors are the opposite. They run specifically for increasing the full auto fire rate. High speed motors should only be used in low FPS guns. High torque motors can pull stronger springs. High speed motors can pull less strong springs. So consider using a high speed motor in a setup that's running 300 FPS or less. High speed motors heat up much faster. High speed motors use a lot more energy. But if you really want a gun that on full automatic goes like, that kind of thing, you get a high speed motor. But personally, I always suggest if you upgrade your motor, go with a high torque motor. So you pull your trigger, the energy goes from the battery to the motor spins. On top of the motor is the first gear. It's a gear, but we don't really talk about it as the gear set, as part of the gear set. It's the pinion gear. The pinion gear turns, and then it turns the bevel gear, which turns the spur gear, which turns the sector gear. All these gears, all you need to know is that they spin, really. If you want to increase the fire rate of your gun and increase the snappiness, you can replace these gears with a lower ratio gear set. The standard ratio gear set is roughly 18:1. So you can buy 16:1, 14:1, 13:1 gear sets that will increase the speed of your setup. Just know that with lower ratio gear sets, it increases the stress on the gearbox because the motor has to turn stronger to because there's less teeth to spin the full cycle and to pull the spring back and all that. When it comes to your gears, you can have them run better and more efficiently by shimming. What shimming is it takes small metal plates and you put them in between the gears on either side in order to get the optimal spacing in between them and reduce friction. You should also consider correcting your angle of engagement by gluing a sorbo pad to the end of the cylinder. That way, the teeth on the bottom of the piston line up properly with the teeth on the sector gear. So, you have your bevel, spur, and sector gear. When the sector gear moves back, it pulls back the piston head and recoils the spring. At the same time, this leaves a vacuum in the cylinder. So the spring is essentially the determining factor in the FPS or the power of your gun. If you get stronger, tougher, higher tension springs, it'll make your gun shoot at a higher FPS. Lower tension springs, lower FPS. Also, if you're in a pinch and you don't want to buy a new spring but need to turn down the FPS of your gun, you can actually cut some of the coils off the end of the spring. So the piston and piston head have been pulled back by the sector gear to create a void, to create essentially air in the cylinder. You must have a cylinder that matches your inner barrel length. A full cylinder needs to go with a longer barrel. This is because with a shorter barrel, it'll force the BB to exit the barrel before it reaches max speed. How this works is that you have full cylinders and you've got ported cylinders. Cylinders with larger ports are better for shorter barrels. That way, when the BB exits the barrel, it's moving at the max speed versus being pushed out too early. Piston and piston head upgrades are good for creating a tighter seal in between the piston head and the cylinder, so no air is lost, and also good for speed. You can get lighter weight pistons that have holes cut out of them, and pistons with metal teeth that are less likely to strip with the cycle of the gearbox. At the same time that the sector gear is pulling back the piston, the sector gear also moves the tappet plate, which loads a BB into the chamber, which is your hop-up unit. The hop-up unit is the most important thing which determines the precision and accuracy of your gun. What hop-up does is it applies backspin to the BB. On most rifles, hop-up controls are behind the ejection port. If you pull back on the charging handle, you usually see some sort of lever or system or something that allows you to turn up and turn down your hop-up. When you turn up your hop-up, the hop-up arm or lever, which is a small piece inside the gun, pushes down on the hop-up nub, which pushes on the bucking. The bucking is a small rubber piece, like a rubber sock, imagine, that goes over the front of the barrel to create a good seal in between the barrel and hop-up chamber. So the hop-up lever pushes the hop-up nub into the bucking, which adds backspin to the BB. When replacing parts, you do not need to replace your hop-up system normally. However, consider replacing the hop-up nub. You can buy different types of nubs and different shapes of nubs that will put more surface area on the BB to provide more consistent spin. Consider replacing the bucking. Buckings have different levels of hardness depending on the strength of the weapon. Higher FPS guns should have harder buckings, lower FPS guns should have softer buckings. If you really want to increase accuracy, there are certain mods you can do to your hop-up. I invite all of you to look up H-hop, flat hop, then R-hop. Each of these are upgrades that increase in difficulty to do, but a flat hop is usually a pretty good system to greatly increase the precision of your rifle. So, moving back a few steps, the sector gear pulls back the piston and also pulls back the tappet plate, loading a BB into the hop-up unit. When the sector gear makes its full cycle, the piston is released, shooting forward, shooting all the air that was kept in the cylinder through the hop-up chamber, pushing the BB out through the inner barrel. So let's talk about inner barrels. In a real weapon, barrel length greatly affects the accuracy of the gun. In Airsoft, it's a little different actually. While longer barrels do have a correlation with more accurate guns, what's more important is the quality of the barrel. It's more important to use very well milled, polished steel barrels than to have a very long, let's say a 500mm barrel. Furthermore, because all airsoft guns are firing 6mm BBs and there's no difference in BB size and power, unlike real guns that have larger cartridges for more powerful rifles, the barrel length will start working against you after a certain point. With a normal sized full seal cylinder, after an inner barrel length of about 450mm, the barrel length will start working against you because there's not enough air in the cylinder to fill the inner barrel. This is except in a few exceptions of weapons that have extended cylinders, like SVDs and SR25s, because the builders of these systems knew that the longer barrel would work against the system, so they built extended cylinders which have more air, which can push BBs out through longer barrels. As previously mentioned with the length of the barrel in Airsoft, the same thing can be pretty much said about the bore. Again, tighter bore barrels have shown to increase accuracy slightly, but not by a noticeable amount. So, a standard bore rifle has something like 6.08 millimeters or something. If you buy just like a normal JG, that might be the barrel it comes, a brass 6.08 millimeter barrel. So you might opt for a type bore, like a 6.03 or a 6.01. Just know that the difference between, you know, your Madable 6.03 type bore and your Madable 6.0 type bore might not be noticeable. However, the difference between your Madable 6.01 type bore and let's say a Prometheus 6.03 type bore, Prometheus is a higher quality bore, even though it's got a higher quality barrel, even though it has a wider bore, the Prometheus was probably more accurate because it's a better machined and polished barrel. So I know I threw a lot of information at you real fast. Just to recap, the battery is connected to the motor through the trigger. When you pull the trigger, the power from the battery spins the motor, which spins the 3 gears inside the weapon, which pulls back the piston head into the spring, filling the cylinder with air and loading a BB into the hop-up. The piston shoots forward, pushing all that air out through the BB into the barrel and out the weapon. Something to consider right now is the upgrade of a MOSFET. What a MOSFET does is it protects those trigger contacts. It keeps them from burning out because electricity no longer runs through them. Instead, the MOSFET is essentially wiring and a small computer that takes energy directly from the battery to the motor. By running the power directly from the battery to the motor through this computer, it eliminates the danger of burning out trigger contacts and also begins running a much more efficient system. You can also buy MOSFETs that have programmability. So as mentioned previously with the HPA systems, you can have the same thing where you can program, instead of full auto, you can program your gun to shoot 2, 3, 4, 5 round burst or whatever. A MOSFET is a very good upgrade if you want your gun to last a very long time. So that's internal parts to the best of my knowledge. I'm sure I messed some things up because I'm not actually a tech, so please be gentle with me in the comments. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching the complete noob guide to Airsoft. I invite you to check out the other videos on my channel, my own projects, my own personal gameplay. Also, if you have any questions or mean comments, please leave them down below. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, follow my social media. Instagram and Twitter is in the bio. Again, thanks, and I'll see you the next one.